I am so excited to be able to share with you part 2 of auto response, talking through anxiety and fear and some of those things that come along with that. But before we get into the message, I wanted to share with you about something that is coming October 3rd. We're starting a brand new series entitled Identity. And so that's going to be coming right off of our Adore conference, October 1st and 2nd. And then Scott will be beginning that message on October 3rd. And you cannot miss it. It's going to be something to help us find our way in this world, because trying to figure out where I fit, where I belong, it doesn't change. You know, it really never changes. It's something that we struggle with in school when we're in elementary school, and then through middle school and high school, and even as adults, it never stops. And so this is going to be a wonderful series for you, and I can't wait to be a part of that. And so today, auto response, fear and anxiety. You know, right from the very beginning of our pastorate here at Forest Park, Scott and I came to pastor in Elizabeth City in November of 2001. Our very first Sunday here was November 18th. And, you know, 20 years we're coming up. It's astounding to think that we've been here that long. But one of our goals right from the very beginning, and the goals of our team, the teams that we've led over the years, is that you would feel validated, that you would feel validated in the story that you bring, that you would feel validated in the things you understand, in the things that you don't understand, and that you would know that your life matters and that the things that you're bringing to the table are important. You know, a lot of the time that we've said throughout these years, we even had one of our conferences that we had the byline, "Your story matters," and which was a great conference. And what I found personally is that it's easy to say your story matters until your story makes me feel uncomfortable, until my story makes you feel uncomfortable. And so we shout that a lot, and we make folks feel comfortable with being authentic and opening up until what they're saying really makes us feel uncomfortable. And I want to tell you about a story in Scripture where the disciples were really uncomfortable with some of the things that Jesus was saying. They didn't understand it. They thought it was a little wild for the time that they were living in. But there are things that I might share today that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. And I just want to encourage you to lean in, because a lot of times us feeling uncomfortable is where we grow. It is where we can embrace that there is a world and a thought process outside of our own. Okay? So just kind of hold on as we go. All right. The reason why that I think that it's so important that validation becomes a huge part of who you are is because of these 3 sentences. That everyone needs to be heard, everyone needs to be seen, and everyone needs to be known. Those are intrinsic needs that I have. Those are needs that you have. Those are needs that your children, that your parents, that anybody you love in humankind, they have those 3 needs. And what I mean by they need to be known is that there is no better feeling than being in a crowded room and knowing that there's somebody that's going to walk in that door and they're going to be looking for you. They're going to be saving you a seat. They're going to be saying you matter, and whatever you bring, it matters too. And so that's the premise of this message today, is to say that whatever you're going through, no matter what it looks like, no matter how painful that it might feel, is that there is a place for you. There is a seat with your name on it. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story when it comes to that. But this is what I have found for me personally, is that rather than someone just telling me how to fix my feelings, when we hurt, when we're lonely, when we're confused, when we've been betrayed, when we don't understand that things are going up, down, sideways, back and forth. It just all seems to be running, getting away from us. Is that this is what we need more than anything. We need somebody to sit, hold our hands, and witness our pain. They don't need to fix it. They just need to say, I'm here, and I'm not going to walk away from you. And that is the hugest difference that is made between me being able to survive a very difficult time and then succumbing to some of the most difficult moments of my life. So again, when things go sideways, upside down, we always have an auto response to stress. Some people, you may have seen I know the movies, TV shows used to, they'd have somebody screaming and losing their minds, and the actor would slap the person in the face and say, get it together, person. And I would always think, how in the world slapping me upside the head is going to help me calm down? But all the dramatic responses to that kind of stuff. But we have a response, we just do, to stress. We actually have an auto response to joy as well, but we have an auto response to stress. And if I were to ask you to raise your hand right now, and I'd say you respond by taking charge, by saying we're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to make it happen. Some of you might say, I respond by crying. I do not know what to do other than just cry. If things are bad, I just need to cry. Other of you will be running around trying to fix it, make sure. You might be the person that's making food, trying to feed everybody. There's always a response to stress, and it's based on our personality type, much what Scott shared about last week. So if you missed part 1, make sure you go back to that. Now, if you have your Bibles with you, or YouVersion, or wherever it is that you read the Bible, I want you to go to Mark chapter 6. You can open up on your iPhones, or that's where this verse starts, Mark chapter 6, verse 30. And what's so cool about this story is that this is a time in Scripture that the disciples were freaking out. They were doing that time that they were screaming, and I can imagine internally, even if they weren't saying outside to Jesus, inside that's exactly what they were feeling. So again, Mark chapter 6, verse 30. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. The apostles then rendezvoused with Jesus and reported on all that they had done and taught. Jesus said, come off by yourselves. Let's take a break and let's get a little rest. For there was constant coming and going. They didn't even have time to eat. So they got in the boat and they went off to a remote place by themselves. Someone saw them going. There's always somebody that's paying attention and got their nose in your business. Somebody saw them going, and the word got around. From the surrounding towns, people went out on foot, running, and they got there ahead of them. When Jesus arrived, he saw this huge crowd. At the sight of them, his heart broke. They were like sheep with no shepherd they were. He went right to work teaching them. So this big crowd had assembled when they were supposed to have a day off. And rather than just going about their business, the King James says that they were that Jesus was moved with compassion, and he got right to work meeting their needs. When his disciples thought that this had gone on long enough, because remember, it was their day off, it was now quite late in the day. They interrupted him, saying, we are a long way out in the country, and it is very late. They said to Jesus, we think you should pronounce a benediction, which my language says that this gig is up. That's not the Bible, that's just me. Say that this gig is over and send these people on their way so they can get some supper. Now remember, we started off saying the disciples were hungry. So now they went across on the boat, they wanted to eat, and now Jesus has taught for 8 or 9 hours, and the people are hungry. So they're kind of blaming the hunger now on the people. And Jesus says this, you do it. Fix them some supper. And they looked at him and they said, are you serious? You want us to go spend a fortune on food for their supper? But he was quite serious. How many loaves of bread do you have? Take an inventory. So basically this big crowd was there. They're wanting Jesus to fix the problem. He turns it back on them and says, you do it, and go find out how much food we have. They come back and they say, that didn't take long. We got 5 loaves of bread and we have 2 fish. So today in my illustration, I wanted to share with you just so you could see what 5 loaves of bread looks like. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loaves of bread. Okay? So that's what that looks like for this crowd. They went out, they asked questions. This is what they came back with. And we have 2 fish. So here's 1, and here's 2. Ugh, that's disgusting. Okay, 2 fish. All right. So 5 loaves. I'm not the cooker person. That would be Scott's responsibility. 5 loaves of bread plus 2 fish. Moving right along. Jesus got them all to sit down in groups of 50 and 100. Now, this is just a little sidebar about the importance of groups. Okay, think about this. So there were all of these people, and Jesus starts numbering them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And as you can imagine, it goes on and on and on. To put them in groups where they could easily be managed. Sometimes our best healing is found within the context of a small group of people. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. He held them to heaven, and he blessed and broke and gave the bread to the disciples, and then they gave it to the people. So Jesus took what was there, the not enough to feed all of those people. He blessed it and broke it, and then they passed it out to everybody who was there. He did the same with the fish. They ate until they were full. The disciples gathered 12 baskets of leftovers. 12 baskets were left out of what didn't even fill 1. More than 5,000 were at the supper. As soon as the meal was finished, Jesus insisted that the disciples get back in another boat and go ahead across to Bethsaida while he dismissed the congregation, all the people. He was going to send them home. And he said to his disciples, you guys go ahead and go. I know you're tired. You go ahead and go across. I'm going to go up to the mountain to pray. Late at night, the boat was far out at sea, and Jesus was still by himself on land. He could see the men struggling with their oars and the wind having come up against them. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the sea. Miracle number 2. He intended to go right by them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost, and it scared them to death, and they started screaming. And then Jesus looked at them in comfort and said, courage, do not be afraid, it is me. And as soon as he climbed into the boat, so it's 4 o'clock in the morning, the storm, it is coming. They couldn't even row, and I'm certainly not a boat person, but they couldn't even row. Everything was coming undone. The wind died down as soon as he got in the boat. They were shaking their heads, wondering what was going on. And this is what I want you to focus on today. They did not understand what he had done at the supper because none of this had yet penetrated their hearts. So a lot of times we might be familiar with the feeding of the 5,000, which really wasn't 5,000, was more like 15,000. Because of the fact that if you count men at that time, there's typically a wife, might be a wife, and a couple of kids running around. So the number of people that was fed by 5 loaves and 2 fish was more like 15,000. Now, when you look up here at this table, do you think that this possesses enough food to feed even 50 people? Let alone 15,000 people. And Jesus was so clear when he sat down in the boat with them. You guys are afraid because you really did not understand what happened with this. They'd moved on past that. You remember they were hungry, they were tired, they wanted some rest. And when they were at their most weak, it is very difficult to recognize the miracle. When you are at your most tired, it's very difficult to recognize all of the good that has happened in your life. when we are tired and we feel as if there's nothing but more dread and anxiety and fear in our lives, it's really hard to go back and remember all the miracles that Jesus has actually done for us. And that's where the disciples found themselves. They responded differently to the stress based on their Enneagram, I would imagine. Because, as Scott shared last week, there are 9 Enneagram numbers, okay? And they're personality types. That is normally our default. That's where we go in stress, that's where we go in joy, that's where we go in big emotions. And that was their first auto response, and it's probably yours as well. Now, I am a 1 on the Enneagram, which is the perfectionist, the reformer. I typically can see things that we need to improve or things that maybe just didn't work out the way I thought they should work out. And I always have a plan. No matter what's going to happen, I'm going to have a plan. And I have to imagine that there were those disciples as a part of those 12 that probably fit the perfectionist. And so I think they probably would have responded like this. How much money do we actually need to get all of these people fed? Because that's what we need to go do. The helpers, the Enneagram 2, I see them walking around kind of patting everybody's head. You know, they're sweating and they're trying to catch them before they actually hit the ground. And so that's what those helpers would be doing, looking, waiting for instructions from Jesus. The Enneagram 3, that is the achiever. Those people are thinking, if we work this right, we can turn 15,000 into 30,000. And this message of Jesus is never going to stop. He's going to be so famous, we're never going to be able to be stopped. That's what those achievers are doing, because they're making the best out of a bad situation. The Enneagram 4s, those guys are the individualists. They have now decided that we must write a song about how bad our hunger feels. We need to write a song, and then we need to lead the 15,000 before we all die of hunger. We need to lead and just go into a song and write about our emotions. The Enneagram 5s, they're the investigators. They decide we need to survey this crowd to see if there are any people here that are nutrition experts. And then we know just how much everybody needs in order for them to get fed. The Enneagram 6s, the loyalists, they have developed a 3-step strategy to get Jesus out of the crowd before they revolt, because they know that he needs a plan of escape. The Enneagram 7s, the enthusiasts, they're the folks that are always so excited. They don't want to feel pain. They don't even want to know that somebody's hungry. They do everything they can to stay away from it. They say, now is the time to lead in a group game, because if we all play this game, we will forget that we've not eaten in 2 days. So that's what those folks do. The Enneagram 8s, those are the challengers. They are thinking to themselves, can you believe this crowd? Who comes to an 8-hour sermon with no snacks? They can't believe that they're even having this conversation. And then the Enneagram 9s, the peacemakers, they are heartbroken at the fact that there are people experiencing hunger, and you can watch them, the tears just streaming down their faces. Now, I thought that was just kind of a funny way to give an example that we all respond to the same situation differently. We all get into a situation that might seem as if it's easy, but you could respond in great stress, and I could respond to the same stress and appear controlled, but we're both feeling the exact same thing. The disciples were stressed out at this. It's a crowd of 15,000. You know, I've traveled into places, outside the United States and even inside the United States. Crowds can get dangerous very quickly. And when they're hungry and they're tired, it is even more difficult to be able to grab control of that situation. And I can imagine that those disciples were really afraid. But this is what Jesus said to them. They immediately looked to him and said, Jesus, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And our auto response is to look at other people. They looked at Jesus to find out what are the answers. And what did Jesus say? He looked at them and said, what do you have? What do you have? Because what happens is most often we can be thinking about how insufficient we are. We feel like our talent and our gift means nothing. But in the hands of Jesus, it becomes a miracle. Jesus took the one who was uncounted, the little boy who brought these fish, and they collected the bread from, the crowd, and he took something that could have never fed 15,000 people and showed that he has the ability. He wanted those disciples. He could have handled it, but he wanted them to be a part of the miracle. And so he says to them, "What do you have?" And I encourage you today, rather than looking at all that you don't have, think about all the amazingness that you do have, all the good things that have happened for you, all the amazing things that you can look back and see that God's hand was right in the middle of it. But this is what I found with us. Because we think that we cannot do everything, we stop and do nothing. We just say, because I can't feed all of these people, I think you should send them home so that they can go take care of themselves. But that's not what Jesus wanted for them. He wanted them to look inside of themselves and discover, what is it that you have that you can match your skills and talents with what I can do as God and meet the needs of these people. He's doing the same thing with you. He's doing the same thing with you. And so he looked at them and said, "What do you have?" Now, I told you that there's parts of, today that might make you feel a little uncomfortable, but I want to share with you a battle, a journey, a situation that I found myself in over the last 2 years that some of you may or may not have been familiar with. But the last 2 years for me have been the most difficult 2 years of my life. Now, we know that we all started the pandemic in 2020. We'll never forget that, March of 2020. How could we ever forget? Some of you have lost jobs. You have lost dreams. You've had to change and alter plans. And some of you have even said goodbye to people that you love as a result of the coronavirus. There has been great loss for you. And I am sorry. I identify with all of that. But for me personally, just to kind of share you a bit of my story, I began to have my first panic attack after the pandemic started. Now, I theoretically have been a pretty fearless person. Very few things have scared me. I am always the first one to say, "Hey, I'll volunteer. I'll jump in. Let me see what I can do." Because in my mind, I think really that I can either figure it out or I can find somebody who can. So that's kind of the way I think. So fear for me, panic for me, anxiety for me were all brand new emotions. I've been to Africa with Forest Park several times. I've led 2 trips. I've gone twice just by myself on this 28-hour adventure. Pulling my backpack and my bags and then blow my husband a kiss over my shoulder and say, "I'll see you in 3 weeks." And that's just kind of who I was. So I was not prepared of the auto response. I wasn't prepared for the auto response of fear, panic, and anxiety. I started experiencing almost a daily battle with anxiety where I felt as if, I couldn't breathe. If you've ever had a panic attack, it feels like you're having a heart attack. But because of the fact that I knew I wasn't having a heart attack, I was checking my pulse. I was making sure, again, I'm very pragmatic. I'm like, "No, you're not having a heart attack." And I realized that it was panic and anxiety that started happening during the pandemic last year. So I decide that in order to alleviate some of that stress, I will start an online group. We were all at home. We were, everything had stopped. We'd stopped having church. And church, in and of its very nature, is to connect. So I came up with a very non-creative name for this group called Connect. How great was that? And I'm definitely not creative. But we connected. And before I knew it, there was like 100 people. And every day, Monday through Friday at 2 o'clock, starting about, I guess it was maybe the second, third week in April, for 4 months, every day at 2 o'clock, we met virtually. Now, what that did for me is that it allowed me to prepare for something on a daily basis and to get ready and to get up, because all I wanted to do was stay in the bed. I did not want to get out. I did not want to face the fact that church had been closed, school had been closed, jobs had been closed, everything had been closed. I could not imagine how an organization, a church, a lot of 501c3 organizations that are based on the fact that people give and that we need people in the building. I couldn't see how in 20 years of work that we had been pastoring here, my pragmatic brain could not see that how we were going to be here on the other side. And so what it started in me was this sense of anxiety, fear, and panic. And it was something that I was dealing with almost every single day. But that group, and those of you who are part of that group, we had such a beautiful connection, and it saved my life in so many ways. And I was able to meet with them and do that. Now, this is the second thing. I'm meeting, we're talking, it's great every day, but it is impossible to outrun your pain. That was the second thing I understood, is because in an effort to meet with those folks to talk about their concerns, I was there for it. You tell me your biggest, your baddest, your worst fear, we're going to address it. And that's what we did for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. We had people from all over the world that were joining that group because the pandemic was a place that we all joined in fear. But as soon as I turned off that phone and I had to sit with myself again, those thoughts in my mind just started running again. And this was so new for me. And I realized it is impossible to outrun the panic. It is impossible to outrun the pain. So this is what we realized. I began to understand. I can't outrun panic. I can't outrun fear. I can't outrun anxiety. So in order for me to be here on the other side of this, I am going to have to feel it. I'm going to have to feel what I am feeling. Feelings are for feeling. They are not for stuffing. They are not for ignoring. But I was really good at ignoring emotion. I was really good at ignoring my own emotion. I've always been able to categorize emotion. Stuff I needed to feel, stuff I didn't need to feel. Now, if you were emotional, I was going to be there to hold your hand. I was going to be there to tell you it is okay to feel what you're feeling. It is just as bad as you feel like it is. And we're going to get up and we're going to keep moving forward. But I didn't give myself that same kindness. I, in my mind, thought I couldn't feel the panic, the fear, and the anxiety. And so I tried to outrun it by staying busy until it caught up with me. So then when I started feeling it, you can imagine. It was not pretty. And then I had to deal with it. It was even worse. But I'm in the process of healing. I will not say that I am healed from it, but I'm in the process of healing. When Scott asked me to share this part of the message of the series, initially I was like, I don't know. I mean, really, everything I'm sharing with you is my Adore message. It's what I had planned to do on October 1. But it was so applicable to this message that to his series, I thought, he wants me to do it, I'm going to do it. And I'm glad I did, because I'm certain that there's someone here that needs to hear this. This is what I want to tell you about the disciples in the middle of that confusing moment. Both when they had to feed 15,000 people with this little bit of food that they were collecting, that the fear and the anxiety that they must have felt, that they wanted to protect and they wanted to be obedient to their teacher. But at the same time, this miracle, it wasn't a miracle then. It was just 15,000 hungry people. And they probably were pretty grumpy. Have you ever known anybody that gets hangry? Like when they get hungry, they lose their minds. People, that's when they can act their worst, is when they need to eat. And so they were dealing with a lot of that stuff. Jesus could have sent those people home to have supper. He could have sent them home to eat. He didn't have to be a part of that. But Jesus knew that in just a few short weeks, those disciples were going to be facing something much more difficult than hungry people. They were going to watch their leader. They were going to watch their friend. They were going to watch their confidant unjustly accused of things that were capital crimes that he did nothing. They were going to watch their friend beaten within an inch of his life and never say a word in his defense. And then they were going to watch that friend murdered on a cross and never say a word in defense. And Jesus knew that in order for them to survive that kind of trauma and be able to carry the message of hope far beyond his death, they were going to need to learn how to understand and recognize the miracle of what it took to feed 5,000 people. And they were going to understand what it meant to sit on a boat that is ready to capsize, and the moment he sits down in front of them, it quiets. They were going to need to do that in their soul, because this is the thing. Jesus sees what we cannot see. He knows what we cannot know. He understands what it takes, what it's going to take for you to live your strongest life. He already knows because he created you. He created you with that default personality type. The Enneagram is so funny in my family because we talk about it a lot. I am a 1. Josh, Ashlyn's husband, is a 2, my son-in-law. Bryson is a mix between a 2 and a 3. Evan is a 4. Scott is a 5. Ashlyn is a 6. We don't have a 7. Cameron is an 8. She's the one that says, "Can you believe you people came with no snack?" She may or may not have said that to me at one time or the other. And then Emily is a 9. So with me and my husband and our kids, we all represent 8 of the 9. They are perfect in their personality types because that's what God created in order for us to make all of this work. Back to my story, so once we started having, and I started dealing with these panic attacks and this fear, and so then we fast forward 7 months. Our church was closed for 7 months. We come back in October, and I'm just kind of dealing with and managing and processing, and we open back up in October, and the statistics become very clear that during the pandemic in churches across the United States, 33% of people either chose to go to a different church, it gave them the opportunity to switch churches, or they decided they would not go to church at all. I can experience pastoring online, and that makes sense. We had all collectively suffered deep, deep trauma. And so one of the things about anxiety is that the American Psychological Association defines anxiety as an emotion that begins to rise inside of us. Sometimes it can cause a physical reaction, increased heart rate, make you feel sweaty, like you are going to just conk over at any moment. But one of the things that is significant about anxiety, and certainly it was for me, is it creates a desire to avoid. You want to avoid situations and things that might cause you to feel that sense of stress and panic. And so everything inside of me wanted to be away from that sense of stress and panic. And the place that was causing me the worst stress and the worst panic was the room that you are sitting in. I began to avoid coming to this room. I didn't even realize it. This room was the birthplace of some of my most joyful moments, watching people find life when there was no life, watching them embrace their future when they thought they had no future. And I began I'd walk in the back door, my Mary Poppins self, high-fiving everybody, hello, how are you doing? I'd be in worship, we'd get started, and by the end of that message, I would find myself backing my way out the green room. There's a corridor behind this, and I'd kind of go back through the corridor, and I'd find myself out the back door in the parking lot. And I wanted to avoid anything that reminded me of the pain of what we had lost. Now, a lot of it, I didn't even recognize that's what was happening. I literally just thought I was losing my mind. Because remember, this is all very new for me. I didn't know what was happening. I wouldn't go out to lunch with my kids. They're like, let's go out to lunch. No, I'm not going out to lunch. I'm going home. What are you talking about? Who wants to go out to lunch? And this had been something that I had always done. I mean, it had been a part of our world. And I would do anything I could to avoid being asked about church. I didn't want to talk about church. But I realized when I was in trouble is when I began having thoughts that this world was not worth staying in. And that it would be easier to not be here than it would be to deal with this every day. Because I could not escape church. I had given my very life, and I didn't want to escape church. I had given my life to ministry. Scott and I had sacrificed, so many different areas to pastor in this room. Now, it wasn't anything anybody took from us. It was something we willingly gave up because that is what we believed we were called to do. So it was a very deep conundrum inside of me. I shared it with my doctor. She's in Greenville, and she was like, this is way bigger than me. And she said, because I was like, now, I do not want to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I said that. She goes, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm not going to do anything. I said, just want you to know that these are thoughts I'm having. She goes, well, it makes sense. A lot of people are having those thoughts. So that's what I want you to understand. If during that pandemic, you felt like the world changed, that the axis of your life changed, it did. You need to feel that, and you need to embrace it so you can heal from it. I eventually found my way to someone who thought, we're very familiar with PTSD. I'm sure most of you are post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of times we think about that in regards to soldiers and people who have suffered so much trauma in war. And I was like, I nowhere near fit that category. But what it is that they, the one therapist to call it complex PTSD, which means you cannot escape it. So see, I couldn't escape it. This is my world. This is my life. It's what I wanted to be. And eventually I realized that I needed to be with someone, a therapist who understood pastoral ministry. Because our world is so unique. I can't just go home and not do it anymore. I can't just pretend that I don't feel what I feel because I want to feel what I feel so I can get on the other side of it. See, my brain, that process-driven, and it was all so convoluted. And so I can say after all of these months of therapy that this is what I've realized about myself. And you might have realized this about yourself. Is that I am really good at categorizing my emotions. And like I said, and what I would do is that based on what my therapist thinks about me is that since 2015, I have experienced a significant traumatic event every year and sometimes twice a year. Now, because I am a high-functioning person, and what that means is that I can handle a lot of pressure, I'm still on the planet. But a lot of people have a hard time with pressure. But this is the way I would work with it. And you can see if this was you. I would take that trauma, I would put it in a nice little bow of a box, I'd wrap a bow on it, and I'd sit it on a shelf. And then there was another traumatic event that might happen. Let's say disappointment. Let's say someone accusing you of something you couldn't do, something you didn't do, but yet you felt that you couldn't say anything. So it felt like your rights were being taken. You put it in a box, you put it on the shelf. Let's say something like your daughter almost dying in birth during the pandemic, and you had to sit in the parking lot, which is what happened to Ashlyn. You put it rather than deal with it, you put it in a box, you wrap a bow on it, and you put it on a shelf. Let's say losing 33% of your congregation after working for 20 years, you put it on a shelf, you put a bow on it and don't want to deal with it. You say you've been to Ecuador in global outreach for 20 years. Every summer you've led a team, and then all of a sudden all of that is removed and you lose that very deep part of your life. You close it up, you put it on a box. You get invited to speak at events in Uganda to make a difference in the life of boys and girls who have been left and abandoned. And all of that is just put away. Well, my shelf kept getting taller and taller until it started collapsing in on top of me. And that's where that anxiety and that panic started arising. Because this is the thing about anxiety. It demands to be heard. Anxiety and panic will create its own narrative. If you try and ignore it away, or you try and shelve it like I did, and you say to yourself, I can do this and I can do that and I can do that, so I do not have to deal with this, it will create its own story to justify its existence. And that's why you can be having a perfectly wonderful day, and all of a sudden thoughts come out of nowhere, and you cannot identify where that came from. And it's anxiety trying to get your attention so that you will deal with it, so that you can heal. Because this is the thing, is that the Lord has blessed me to have a lot of skills, a lot of different skills. I have been able to accomplish a lot of things in my life, but I am not superhuman. I am just like you. And a lot of times people don't want to hear that their pastors hurt. They want their pastors to be the source of all of the answers. And we've worked really hard to have a whole lot of them. And we'll continue to do that. But I promise you, if you cut your finger, you are going to bleed, just like everybody else. There is no difference between you and between me. You might have some superhuman skills in a lot of areas, but we all bleed the exact same way. So what I've had to realize is that I, at this point in my life, am walking with a limp. I am walking a little bit slower. You know, Scott's always said that I was so hard to catch. He would always say, I'm so hard to catch. I would give you a hug if I could just catch you. I would give you a kiss if I could just catch you. And one of the things that I realized during this journey, he has been very transparent and very honest about his story. I grew up in a great environment. You know, one of the first things I said to my therapist is, I cannot really tell you any negative childhood memory. My mom and dad just created such a beautiful environment for us. He had a different struggle. He had a different life. And in the middle of one of these, I call them, throat clenching anxiety attacks. And if you've ever experienced that, you know what that means. Like you feel like someone has their hands literally around your throat. I said to him, I am sorry I didn't understand. I really tried, because I did. I tried to be empathetic. I tried to be whatever it was that I needed to be for him. But I didn't understand. I tried, but I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And he said, Lana, you don't have to say you're sorry. But there are some things that you cannot understand until you experience them. When we look at one another through that and through those eyes, there's so much more compassion that we have for each other. We realize that political differences, really at the end of the day, what does it matter? I mean, there are huge, big issues, and I don't want to say that it doesn't matter. But to fall out of love with one another and not be able to hold each other's hand because you have a difference about some type of philosophical issue. It is so much bigger than that. Those stories, your story, the story of the person sitting beside you, in a lot of ways it could be life and death. And your ability to just listen and be open and be honest with your own pain could make the difference in somebody's life. Because this is the thing, dealing with your pain isn't selfish. Dealing with your pain is the pathway to healing. It is the only way to get on the other side. After those disciples got on the other side and they recognized, okay, Jesus is here. We're not going to drown. Everything's going to be okay. He's got a lot of great stuff happening. Maybe we're just going to hang with him a little while longer. They had no idea that they were going to have to call back on the courage that it took to believe him to feed 15,000 people. That it took them to keep that boat from capsizing. And he's going to do the same thing for you. Now the band's coming to sing a beautiful song called Set My Heart. And as they sing, I want you to think about 2 areas of your life that you know, and I got some other areas. I'm going to tell you straight up. You know, my best friend died in December, and I can say that with a straight face because I have refused to grieve for her. My therapist asked me, like, when do you plan on grieving? I will let you know. I will put it on the calendar and we will talk about it. You know, so there are areas that I have not dealt with. And that will continue to cause that stuff to rise up. But I want you to think about 2 areas of your life that you've kind of said, you know what? Not going to do it. And while Carla Beth sings this beautiful song, think about what it means to set your heart on him and what he can do to help you.
Quiet the voice of doubt again, echo within me every promise. Let your word be louder than my fears. Speak to the void when I can't see. Lift up my head in every valley. Let your joy be greater than my grief. I have set my heart, set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. You make a way when none is found. You tell the roaring ocean to bow. I believe you're moving even now, right here, right now. And I have set my heart, set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. I have set my heart, set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. You set my heart on you. You. And nothing will ever break me, ever slay me. All my hope in you. And nothing will ever shake me, overtake me. All my hope in you. And nothing will ever set my heart on you. I set my heart on you. Set my heart on you. Oh, set my heart on you, God. My heart on you, God. Oh. Let's sing that chorus one more time. I have set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. I have set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you.
Every time you see a beautiful gift wrap box, I want you to think about how Lana has shoved her emotions in those boxes for so long, and that I've piled them up on a shelf. And as beautiful as they are, when they come falling down on top of you, they hurt. They hurt. And you don't have to carry it by yourself. There are people here that want to help you unwrap it. We want to help you carry it. And we want to make whatever you're going through a little bit more manageable. As you listen to that song, you know, I was thinking about it, that nothing's going to shake me, nothing's going to break me. That for you right now might seem so far away from how you feel, because you think, I am shaken, I am broken, I don't feel that. But what you can do is start getting closer to setting your heart on Him. Just one step is all it takes. One step. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for these beautiful people that you have brought to our church today. Thank you for every volunteer. Thank you for every person that's watching online. I pray that it has just communicated this message, that we are holding hands, that we are holding hearts, so that we can navigate this really messy world that we call life. We thank you for the honor of being able to sit in a building that is so comfortable and hear about how good you are. In your name we pray. Amen. We love you guys so much. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next Sunday for the next part of Auto Response. Have a good day.